the good news is we've said so many things repeatedly, we can just say we said it repeatedly. We don't have to remember if we did.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
This is Jennifer Baumgartner from Perkins County Health Services in Grant, Nebraska, and you're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast.
All right. So in today's episode replay, because, it's the holiday season, we're going to talk more about the HICP. And because we already had 2 interviews with Erik Decker. And so we're going to let you re-listen to all that.
Put a cherry on top.
Yeah. So as it is in the States, happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys. Thanks for listening throughout the year. And even though Donna and myself will not be together, we will be still toasting each other from afar.
That's right. And we will all make our family say thank you to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast listeners. It'll be a special thank you of what we're grateful for.
Absolutely. So here's the replay of what episode is it, Donna?
189.
Yeah,
189. There you go.
So here's a replay of episode 189 when we talk about HICP or HICP or whatever. We couldn't figure out what to call it at the time, but it has now become officially HICP.
There you go.
All right. Have a great Thanksgiving, guys, and we will see you again next week.
Are you frustrated with your current IT provider? Are you sure you're getting the security and protection you need? Are you putting your patients and your practice at risk? If you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, give Security First IT a call to learn more about how they can protect your patients, your practice, and your bottom line. Find them online at securityfirstit.com or call 980-288-5100.
The number of medical practices that think they're HIPAA compliant is pretty staggering. Effective privacy and security are an ongoing process, not a checklist. And that's why at Cardin, they don't just assess your situation and leave you with a report, but they work with you all along the way. Call Cardin today at 678-292-5001 or visit them on the web at cardinhq.com. Aren't your patients worth it? The last time we talked about this new thing called Section 405D that is going to be part of the Cybersecurity Act of 2015. So we're going to dive into that today. But they call for adapting the our critical infrastructure to better handle cybersecurity issues and having a private-public partnerships and creating task force to really look at this more deeply and try to come up with a way that the health industry could better secure the cyber and manage threats and all that good stuff. So they did a fantastic job in this document. So we're gonna take a look at that in today's episode.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. It is called the Health Industry Cybersecurity Practices Managing Threats and Protecting Patients Report. Whew. Or guide or whatever. But they, everything has to have an acronym. And this acronym is HICP. I guess we could call it HICP. I don't know. HICP. We may call it HICP because I can't come up with any other way to say HICP, and it doesn't just roll off the tongue that way.
HICP.
So, HICP. Do your HICP with your HIPAA.
Yeah, like all chickpea, right. HICP. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
There you go. Yeah. Anyway, this guide is really, really awesome. And we had been looking for it. And they had promised that we were going to get it in December. So we're like watching for it. And then, the holidays hit and my surgery was all this stuff. Thing comes out on December 28th.
They did it.
Boom. I know. Kudos for you for making it happen to get it out in December as promised. And we, heard about it and heard some of the information about it back in the NIST security conference that we checked out. And HHS they stated, here's our objectives for this publication. It says this publication is the result of a collaborative work HHS and its industry partners embarked on more than a year ago, namely the development of practical, understandable, implementable, industry-led, and consensus-based voluntary cybersecurity guidelines to cost-effectively reduce cybersecurity risk for healthcare organizations of varying sizes, ranging from local clinics, regional hospital systems, to large healthcare systems. Boom.
Wow.
That's one sentence, people. I'm just saying.
That's one sentence. That's a big run-on sentence.
I know, it's one sentence. But that's quite a lofty goal. And, from what I see, I think they've really, as close to perfectly attained it as you can, considering all of those requirements. Now, granted, I often get told that things that make complete sense to me do not make sense to others. So we're going to have that input.
That's what we got the show for today. I'm going to break it down for me.
But I do want to make a point that kudos definitely go to the co-leads of the task force, because they were really driving things. And that is Erik Decker, Health Sector Coordinating Council co-lead.
Yeah.
So he's on the public side. He's the Chief Security and Privacy Officer of the University of Chicago Medicine. And, we saw his boss talking at the NIST conference. And then Julie Chua is the Government Coordinating Council co-lead. And she is Risk Management, Office of Information Security, Office of the Chief Information Officer at HHS. Wow.
Mm-hmm. That's a big email signature right there.
I know, right? But we do want to give them kudos, because I know, you and I don't have time to participate in these kind of things. And I'm sure that it was very much a time-sucking thing for it to be as successful as it appears to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's take a look at the guide. We'll open the book, so to speak. Yeah, but so the interesting part is, as it started out, they set forth some pretty specific requirements of the document, that the task force would accomplish. And so we're going to get into what those three are, which I think is pretty interesting in and of itself, that they can even try to accomplish these three goals together.
Well, they basically took that giant sentence and made it a little bit more, at least you could follow it. So it starts with a common set of voluntary, consensus-based, industry-led guidelines, best practices, methodologies, procedures, and processes to achieve three core goals.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So number one, cost effectively reduce cybersecurity risk for a range of healthcare organizations. Boom. All right. So already I'm going, okay, cost effectively and reducing cybersecurity. I don't know.
Yeah. How you make that happen?
Yeah. Then number two, support the voluntary adoption of and implementation of its recommendations. All right. So here we go again with voluntary adoption.
I know that always scares me, but we've seen the results of voluntary adoption too many times.
Yeah. Most people volunteer not to do it.
You're right. But yeah, we're going to hope that, because this is a thing that many people have asked for, that they will be more induced into volunteering to do it.
Can you volunteer and be induced at the same time?
Yeah. We call it being, what is it? Voluntold.
Yeah, exactly. And then number three, the last one, and just to say 1 and 2 and 3 go together. So it's not or, it's and. So, right. And number 3 is and ensure on an ongoing basis that content is actionable, practical, and relevant to healthcare stakeholders of every size and resource level. Dude.
There you go.
That one right there, just by itself, is like, what?
I know. I wouldn't even, that's where I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not participating in that. I got nothing.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about it is it says for, an ongoing basis, which means I'm hoping that they're going to continue to develop this over time and as things change and new threats come out. So we're going to see maybe updates annually or something with this.
Yeah, I don't know how that'll work, but I do know that they will be continuing to review things because they said, we're starting with 5 basic common threats.
Mhm.
So hopefully we're going to see a lot. And there were over 150 members in a combination of private and public sector folks in the healthcare industry as a whole. So you don't know how much everybody did, but that's a lot of input so that you are making sure you're getting input from all these different levels, and the fact that they wanted it to be consensus based, so they wanted everybody to agree.
We can't even get a consensus, my wife and I, to go to dinner somewhere. How they got 150 people to have a consensus on 5 items is amazing.
You just vote and it's democratic. There you go.
Is that what it is? Maybe I'll
Yeah,
start doing
that's it.
that. We'll just vote for dinner.
Yeah, there you go. And who gets 2 votes? That would be your wife.
Exactly.
So they get 5 common threats that the healthcare industry is up against from a cybersecurity perspective. Granted, there are other threats. We're going to just focus on cybersecurity with this. And then they came up with 10 best practices to ensure you are protected from those threats, at least as best as possible. We all know there's nothing perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And then those 10 best practices have what they call sub-practices. So those sub-practices are the actual to-do items. And the best practices are the projects. So don't think there's 10 things to do and you're done. Just don't. So I did like how they had, well, here's the threat and here's the potential impact. So basically, here's what we're worried about. So the first threat is email phishing attack. And what they're worried about is that that's delivering malware or capturing credentials, and both of those further compromise the organization. That's pretty straightforward, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, they break it down where you can understand it.
Yeah. So, this is how they deliver malware and steal credentials, and either way, you could compromise the entire organization. That's why we worry about email phishing. Ransomware attacks.
Still a thing.
Still a thing. And actually, there has been a big uptick just in the just since like the second week of January. And there's several new ones out there and modified ones. But the potential impact, assets locked and held for monetary ransom, extortion, and may result in the permanent loss of patient records.
Yeah. And to your point, some of the more recent ransomware things we've seen this month have been talking about ransomware attacks where they're not really asking for ransom. They're just destroying stuff.
Yeah, they tell you need to pay, but then once you do, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And I've read some articles that they are seeing adaptations of ransomware where not only does it encrypt it, but it also exfiltrates it. And that's the thing we've always been worried about.
Yeah.
And, all these people, well, you don't have to worry about ransomware because nothing else. Let me tell you something. When you do that forensics, you learn amazing things that are going on networks sometimes. And more than once, you hear about people who find out that their network has been hacked for months and they didn't know it. And when the hackers were done, they launched a ransomware attack.
Yep.
Yeah, ransomware attack means we're done with you.
Yeah, we got what we wanted.
We're going to get our last little bit of money out of you if we can. So there you go. The next threat, number 3, loss or theft of equipment or data.
Yeah, because that's a big deal.
Yeah. So breach of sensitive information is what they worry about, and it may lead to patient identity theft. Hello. We talk about that one all the time. And, there's the theft that occurs by an insider and the theft that occurs by a hacker stealing the data. But the loss of the data is the one that drives us insane, because if things were properly encrypted and properly inventoried and managed, we wouldn't see those happening that often. But, this laptop is only used for this one medical device. We don't have to encrypt it. If it moves,
Encrypt it.
encrypt it. If you can pick that thing up and walk out with it, easily, it should be encrypted. Sorry, done. Mic drop. Number 4, accidental or intentional data loss. And you have to deal with this because you get one disgruntled employee and things are not good.
Yeah.
Because you have to worry about removal of data from the organization, intentionally or unintentionally, and how it may lead to a breach of sensitive information.
Yeah. That
And when we talk,
could be your shredding company driving down the road with it, somebody throwing it in the dumpster, your IT guy taking your systems back to their office and working on them. Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
yeah, there's a long list of ways. You could just have somebody steal a spreadsheet full of data and start signing up for student loans with it. Been known to happen. My favorite thing is years ago, this is how well advertising works. Years ago, and I don't remember whether it was IBM or AT&T, and they were advertising, I think it was AT&T. They were advertising about how you had to worry about these things, and it was a guy who was like getting ready for work. They were showing him getting ready for work, and he had his laptop with him through every stage of getting ready for work. Like he's brushing his teeth and his laptop's there, and he's just humming. And then every periodically he'd reach over to his laptop and click on something, and all they would show is delete, delete, delete. And essentially what the commercial was showing was he had all kinds of access, and he was quitting his job, and he was killing everything before he came in. So this is a real problem, and people need to understand it. Because these vendors who have full access to everything, hello, IT vendors, they get one disgruntled employee, and think of how much damage they could do.
Yeah, a lot.
Right. That's why you have to be nice to people, David. And number 5, attacks against connected medical devices that may affect patient safety. Mm-hmm. Okay, that undermines patient safety, treatment, and well-being easily. Which, we talked about the growth of IoT, and that's the medical devices and all these other things. So those are the 5 threats. This is something that we talked about repeatedly, and everything in this guide worries about those 5 threats. And it's a series of documents. There's the main document, and that's what everybody needs to read. Just go read that document first, because it's geared for everybody from executives to the technical people to, even clinical people can read that and really understand what this program is about. And they work very hard to bring home the message that it's the people, that patient safety is the issue and everybody has to participate, which is something we've said repeatedly. Mm-hmm. The good news is we've said so many things repeatedly, we can just say we said it repeatedly. We don't have to remember if we did. But there's a few things that I really, really like about what they have in there. And one of the big ones is they even cross-reference things that make sense to clinical people, Mm-hmm. So they do the things like hand hygiene for cybersecurity. Okay, hello. That clinical people should be able to understand that. And I'm sure they got that idea from me. Because I know, what was it? Like 2.5 years ago, more than a year ago, I did a whole thing where I took the CDC infection protection guide or preventing infection guide from the CDC in an ambulatory environment and turned it into took every point and then turned it into a cybersecurity guide and made it be talking about let's don't spread the germs and, things like doorknobs and all of that kind of stuff and how quickly things can spread. So I love that they've got those kinds of things in that main document. And it goes through the 5 threats with cute little pictures and drawings. But then you get down to the nitty gritty, which is what all the technical people want. But I want to encourage the technical people to read the main document.
Yeah, RTFM, dude.
Yeah, read the whole thing. You don't understand the big picture, and it's very, very important that you understand the big picture of what they're trying to do and the messages you're supposed to be getting out there. So, but the two associated technical guides, those technical volumes, they have one version and then a second version. And most technical people, these are like the holy grail to them. Just give me the best practices. Just give me. I'll just go do it. So, but that's these 10 practices they came up with, which are also like 10 different projects, note to self, and then the associated sub practices, which are the actual to-dos.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the first one is for small healthcare organizations, and then the second one is basically for everybody else, the medium and large. So there's that sizing thing that they do, but they don't just say you decide and pick one. They give you a matrix to determine which one you are. And so don't just assume you're going to be a small one. And if you're an MSP, read both of them after you've read the main one.
Yeah.
Don't just skip to these. So as you mentioned on that cross-reference guide, it was pretty interesting. The decision chart on the small, medium, and large.
Mm-hmm.
What did you find interesting?
Well, just that they spell it out as far as, what actually makes up a small, medium, or large. And of course, we've had clients come to us and we only have, 6 or 7 providers. So, we're small.
Yeah. That's not the case, is it?
No, it is not the case.
Not necessarily. So, most people just look and say, well, this is the number of providers, so therefore that's all you need to know. And we always say, no, it's the size and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at things, so they have the health information exchange partners. How many different partners are you shooting information to?
Right.
So a small one has 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
A medium has several, and large has a significant number.
More than several.
More than several. Then they look at your IT capability. And a small has, even break fix and project by project basis outsource IT if they do anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Medium has dedicated IT sources on staff, or they have no or limited dedicated security resources on staff. So they're outsourcing things.
Yeah. Interesting, though, they separated IT and security.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, which,
you got 2 different things.
Yeah. Which is the way we actually present in our business when we're talking to a prospect or a client, really, but especially when we do a prospect, we actually have those separate. So a client has to make a decision about what type of IT services they want first, and then they have to make a choice of what type of security services they want. They're not the same.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. Just because you understand IT doesn't mean you understand the security.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people make that assumption, including the IT people.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly the same. Now, there's many that do, like me and David, but but that doesn't mean everybody does. So it is very important.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the large ones, they have dedicated people, and they have a CISO and a CIO and all these different things.
EIO.
And then you look at cybersecurity investment.
Yeah. Is there such a thing?
There needs to be. It needs to be. We've been preaching for years that technology needs to be a budget line item, period. But a lot of people still don't do that. So now you need not just technology, but you need cybersecurity investments on top of that. And if you don't have those line items in your budget, you're really somewhere you're going to get screwed.
Yeah.
So the cybersecurity investment, small organization, non-existent or limited funding.
Mm-hmm.
We can't afford any of this stuff, David. Then you have the medium one, funding allocated for specific initiatives, potentially limited future funding allocations, and cybersecurity and IT budgets are blended.
Yeah. And that's
What'd I just say? Technology and a cybersecurity one.
yeah. So then they put them together there.
Yes, they're blended. It's a blended family.
It should be, but not often.
I know, right? And then, of course, you got a dedicated budget with a roadmap and all kinds of stuff in the large organizations.
Yeah.
So those are what they consider common attributes that you evaluate first for small, medium, and large.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't jump right to how many providers do you have?
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
It is, because we'll cover the provider size next, but I really do think that as they've shown here, the provider size is something that should be considered down the list and not first.
Right. Because then they say, okay, how many providers? And then they have a separate list if you're acute or post-acute care organization, and then if you're a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So you depending on what type, how you count, everybody counts differently in those types of scenarios. So we're going to worry about just the provider. 1 to 10 physicians is small, and acute to post-acute is 1 to 25. And then, of course, hospitals, they count beds, and a small hospital is 1 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
But then they point out complexity.
Yeah, and
Did we just say that?
This is where
Size
it gets you a
and
little
complexity. Bit. I know, right? I only have 5 providers, so I don't have to worry about anything. Yes, but it also says single practice or care site in complexity. And then a medium one has multiple sites in extended geographic area.
Yep.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I just moved up.
Yeah, we see that a lot. They have 5 providers in 2 or 3 locations.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things we take into account with our pricing, is because we know if there's multiple locations, there is more complexity.
Mm-hmm. A lot more.
And once you have so many providers, there's more complexity. So there's a lot more to it than just what most people think about. So 11 to 50 physicians is medium, and then over 50 is the big one. And then when you're looking at acute care, 500, and hospitals, the break point to go to large is over 300 beds. So clearly, when we caution you not to assume you're small, because they also have a section called Other Organization Types. Interestingly enough, small is blank in this area. But under medium, they say practice management organization. So that's like those PHOs and organizations that, you basically sell to us, to outsource to us managing your practice, and you can just worry about treating patients. And we know that doesn't work exactly like that, but that is what they sell. Managed service organizations. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller device manufacturers, smaller pharmaceutical companies, and smaller payer organizations. So they're making it clear there that small can be medium. So in many, many cases, those that start looking at this thinking they're small will quickly see that more of their business definitions land in the medium column than in the small.
Yep. So we still
That's
don't know if size matters or not at this point.
Okay, so moving along, check out the volumes. Look at the small one. If you're an MSP, you need to read all of them. We already talked about that. You're an IT provider. You need to understand the full realm before you make any proposals to your clients and point to this document. You need to understand, where everything lands, but do what's reasonable and appropriate, please. Don't come in and, quote everything that's at the high end of the medium for every organization. And since we're saying reasonable and appropriate, David, what is it very, very important for us to point out?
It is important to understand that following these guides does not mean you are HIPAA compliant.
Mm-hmm. That is correct, because they are not the same.
No.
In fact, David found something really interesting in the appendix list of the acronyms. So, here I am worried about all the details. David's reading the appendix acronyms list. I'm just want to point that out. But he did find something interesting that he needs to make sure we cover as another point when it comes to HIPAA compliance.
Absolutely. So, and being the absolutely detail-oriented person I am, as I'm looking through and I get to page 34 of 36, I'm looking at the acronyms. I don't know why this jumped out at me, but it says the acronym is PHI, and the definition is personal health information. And I immediately busted out laughing. I was like, who did this? It is not personal health information. I have this argument with people all the time. Mm-hmm. It is protected health information because not all personal health information is protected health information. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Preach it, brother.
I did. Can I get a witness?
Yeah. It's definitely the case that we do have to have that argument from time to time, but we teach the fact that it's protected because we want you to think about it as people say, well, is that PHI? I want you to think protected the minute you use that term.
Mm-hmm.
Protected, not personal. So it is protected health information, and we have a link for any of you that would like to argue with David. Go ahead and check out that link before you try to argue with David.
Yes, because you will be wrong.
You can try to argue with me. I will not engage, but David will take it.
So we'll have to reach out to the creators and say,
yes.
can you change that? Because
please,
yeah, we just don't need to fuss about this anymore. It's protected.
Yeah, we have enough problems. Which our next episode, David's already titled.
What was that? Never mind. Yeah, that's the argument I've been having online.
Yeah. Essentially, with a more flair, we're going to talk about stupid stuff people say about HIPAA. At least that's David's term, but he kind of used some.
We could probably do a series on that.
Yeah, I know, right? We nicely have called it HIPAA myths before, but we're going to talk about it as stupid stuff. So also with the 2 volumes of technical details, the technical details, they also have a volume of resources and templates.
Mm-hmm.
And this is great. I love that guide as far as how it gathers information from all over the place that's helpful, that's freely available. And, I've kind of kept my own little list of those things, quick reference. I'm just going to use that from now on.
Mm-hmm.
Because it links to all these things that I've always, known that's out there, but sometimes I forget about them because I'm not looking at the list. But it's got some great stuff in there and some templates on policies and procedures kind of stuff. And, and no, this would not be your security policies and procedures and you are done. Again, this will not handle all of HIPAA compliance. And you don't just hand out these. You want to make sure they actually go with what your policies and procedures you are actually doing include. And then finally, they mentioned that they have Cybersecurity Practices Assessments Toolkit known as Appendix E1. And they said it would be available soon, but you could email and get an advanced copy, which I did do. They were very nice and provided it fairly quickly. And it's a spreadsheet. It's not quite ready because I think they're still, trying to clear up things like PHI in them. I got to go look. But basically, it's a shortcut version of all the tech volumes. So it says, determine your size, do this, do this, do this. And it's all in a spreadsheet for checking it off. Because so many people work from spreadsheets. We work from project management tools, not just spreadsheets anymore. So we would convert that to most of our tools, but it's handy to use that if you're working with a group and it's a lot of disparate people. And it's also handy to be able to use that to send over to somebody and say, how many of these things do you do? My vendor.
Yeah.
But again, I really encourage you to read the guides and not just get this thing and start working. It is very important to understand the big picture and not the details and nothing else. And another thing I'm a big fan about is it all cross-references to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which made me just cheer with excitement. It's one of those moments where I'm a nerd because I get excited about that kind of stuff. I know, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, but you do the same thing. I know you do. So you pick the guide, and that's the thing that tech people need, or these, those that can do geek speak. Then you use those guides. Now, it is very important to note that if you're a large organization, you're supposed to do everything in the medium and the large. And if you're a medium, I think they replace what the small would be with the medium, higher level. So it's like the higher level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was important that we compare what these sub-practices are, how they kind of look between the different sizes. And so on the email protection systems is one of the practices. You should have email protection systems, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Then the sub-practices for a small group include a guide on email system configuration, what kind of education you need to do, and phishing simulation.
Right.
Which, phishing tests, we know that.
Yep.
All of those are pretty much included in what the medium enterprises need to do, which is you have basic email protection controls. There's a little bit more than the email system configuration.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-factor authentication for remote access. So we don't need to talk about that again. We talked about that in the last episode. Email encryption and workforce education.
Mm-hmm.
So there was education. So education.
Just a fancy word for training.
I know, right? And then in a large organization, so you have to do, in a large, you do everything in the medium, and you do advanced and next generation tooling, digital signatures, and add in analytics-driven education where you're really looking to see what's working, what's not working, how can we change things up, where do we need help?
Yeah.
So you can see how it gets, bigger and bigger as you go. So know that that's one of the big reasons you should read the entire document. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so here are the 10 practices. You do them, David.
All righty. So we talked about number one being the email protection systems. And number 2 on the list is endpoint protection systems. So that's, protecting the computers and the servers and, everything that's an endpoint of where you're doing work from. Could be also mobile devices and things like that. Number 3, access management. Number 4, data protection and loss prevention. Number 5, asset management. Number 6, network management. Number 7, vulnerability management. Number 8, incident response. Number 9, medical device security. And number 10, you knew we weren't going to leave it out, cybersecurity policies.
I know, right? Those all sound familiar, don't they?
I know. It's almost starting to sound like HIPAA.
Yeah, it's kind of like the healthcare half sys 20.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So we've included in on the website, in the blog article, it'll have the sub-practices so that you could really see all the different sub-practices for each of the size organizations for those 10. So you can see that the 10 have, their own, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can't even count it. Never mind. There's a lot even for the small organization. And then when you get to the medium organization, things are, they continue to grow as you would expect.
Right.
Yes. So, check all of those out. I am really interested in, getting input from anybody who wants to share it about the incident response and any of the other things that you see on there and you notice as you're going through these things. Certainly send us some info or post about it, whatever you want to do. And then here's the part that my propeller really got spinning on. The guides include suggested metrics to measure the effectiveness.
Oh.
Because that's a bonus for people like me. We've talked repeatedly. When I ask for documentation, I'm not saying I don't think you're doing your job. I'm saying I think you're doing your job and I want to be able to prove it.
Yeah. I don't care what you do unless you can show me what you do.
That's right. If it's not documented, it didn't happen.
That's right.
So you can be doing this for 5 years and you can't prove it. I might as well just, keep moving because you can't share me anything. You can't share me anything. So just as an example, I pulled one of the, just grabbed one of the metrics that they list. And for each of the 10 practices, they have metrics on almost everything. And this was one on endpoint security practices. So you ready? And I would love to see this on a report, people. That's all I'm saying. Percentage of endpoints that meet all patch management requirements each month, not once a year, once a quarter, each month. The first goal is to achieve a high percentage of success. Secondary goals are to ensure that there are practices to patch endpoints for third-party and OS-level application vulnerabilities and to be able to determine the effectiveness of those patches. Without the metric, there might not be checks and balances in place to ensure satisfactory compliance with expectations.
But I have Windows updates turned on automatically.
This is why we can't be in the same city when we record, because you'd hear me smacking. So when you are reviewing these things, implement everything, including worrying about the metrics and the reporting so that we can prove these things are being done.
Mm-hmm.
There are organizations out there that, are working on these data breach laws and the privacy laws and all of those kind of things. And the way those are starting to turn is, if you can prove that you have been meeting things like the NIST cybersecurity framework and you've got documentation to show it, or the SIS-20 or HIPAA or whatever, and you can show you are actively doing everything you can, things can still go wrong, but it will give you a bit of a safe harbor to protect you from some of the lawsuits that are out there. And I think that the cybersecurity insurance is going to start doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. What about you, David?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In fact, we're working on an interview to talk about cybersecurity insurance. But that's not for today. It's another day. For today, I think we've covered a lot of this. We could certainly do deep dives we could do an episode about each one of the practices.
Yeah.
That there's that much detail and there's that much stuff in there that you can evaluate and figure out what's reasonable and appropriate. So please, there's no excuse for not taking this guide and implementing what's reasonable and appropriate of the practices and sub-practices and the metrics throughout 2019.
Yep.
So here's February 1st. Plan it out. And if you need some help, give us a holler.
Holla, girl.
Holla back, girl. Because, that is what we do for a living, is help people do these kinds of things, and the documentation and the analysis and the decisions. So I'm just saying, we figure out where's the best place to spend your money.
We just podcast to give us an excuse to talk to each other.
I know, right?
But it is a good guide in that we always hear people talking about, HIPAA's all this, gray area, moving target. We don't know what to do, how to do it. It's kind of best practices. There's all types of excuses. And more we are seeing things coming out. And this is a great one where it says, look, these are the things we're asking you to do. And this is not HIPAA, but it's about healthcare security. And so if you're doing these things, because you remember, HIPAA is not about compliance, but if you're doing the things around privacy and security, then you've taken a giant leap forward in your compliance program.
A giant leap for mankind.
Yes, and a small step for me. All right, folks, that is our show for today. I want to thank you for listening. And remember, share us out on your favorite social media and rate us on our podcasting app. Go check it out. It's pretty cool. And I can't rate it myself but one time, so otherwise I keep doing it. Anyway, make sure you help us spread the word, and always remember, share your questions and ideas. And remember, for Donna and myself, that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.